Hello, welcome to You Don't Know Mojack. My name's Ryan,
My name's Brent.
and this episode we're discussing SST 230, The Last Awakening LP. It's been a while since we've had a recording by The Last on the show, and we love that band. Last time we had Joe Nolte on, but this time, Brent, we've got some extra special guests.
Yeah, they're not even really guests this week. They're kind of like co-hosts or something.
True.
We've got Jeff and Soraya on from the Paisley Stage Raspberry and Rhyme podcast.
Yeah, it's so cool to have Jeff and Soraya on. They had us on their show, and then they lowered themselves and joined us on our show. But it's so cool to have them on. They're really experts about the Last and the Paisley Underground scene, which, as you'll hear in a few minutes, arguably, and I think we touched on this during the Last Confessions release as well, how, the Last arguably was the inspiration for the Paisley Underground. So they're definitely great co-hosts to have, and they'll join us like right when we throw to History Lesson Part 1, which is also new for us and very, very cool. Such nice people, very knowledgeable. I kind of feel like when we do our Mojack wind-up, Brant, remember the wind-up?
Of course I remember. The ever-evolving...
The wind-up.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So when we get our Econoline van and we finally meander our way down for the wind-up party, it's in California, of course.
Right.
But I feel like...
Don't forget, we're making a stop in Chicago now, though.
Chicago, we're going to go record shopping. By the way, Reckless Records. That's where and Wax Tracks, probably.
Dude, we're going with John Corbett.
Oh, dude, yeah, you're right.
We're going to go where he says.
Yeah, well, I always like to go to Reckless when I'm there, and I've never been to Wax Tracks, so we'll see. But I feel like as part of the wind-up road trip, we're going to have to hang with Jeff and Soraya. I was thinking, record shopping, tacos, couple of pints on the beach, on a picnic bench.
I can get behind that, man.
Yeah. All right. Well, before we get into this release and hanging out with Jeff and Soraya, why don't you hit us with some spiels, Brant? Oh, wait. Is this 10 more cassette tapes?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Good. I've been waiting all week for this. Do it.
Yeah, so last week I was spieling about some tapes I bought in this massive haul. So here we go. This is part 2. These are honestly, there's a few I left behind, and just I'm filled with nothing but regret, but I'll find a way to move on.
Not for long, though. You'll be back.
Yeah.
You think anyone's going to buy them before you're back?
I don't know. Well, you know how it is. Okay, Black 47. Remember that band?
I don't. Remind me.
Okay, so I bought this tape called Fire of Freedom. It's their second release from 1993. We talked about them a month or so ago on the Kirk Kelly episode. They're a New York Celtic rock band. Super political, lots of working class themes. I can see why Kirk brought them up. He mentioned them in our episode.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I love it. Maybe a little overproduced, but the songs are great. I'm on the hunt for more Black 47 for sure.
Cool. Good reminder.
Yep. Okay, speaking of Celtic rock, an album I really should already own but don't, and it's Shane MacGowan and the Popes' album, The Snake. Essentially Shane's first solo album with the band The Popes backing him up, released in 1994. I hate to say it, but this was made kind of before Shane was too far gone to make good music anymore.
Oh.
It's killer. I don't know. Does Shane get the recognition he deserves as a songwriter, do you think?
No. I think other aspects of his life overshadow it.
Yeah.
I can't recall anything where people really highlighted that about Shane. They really talk about, tabloid shit when it comes to him.
Stuff.
Yeah, don't you think?
Teeth, yeah, I don't know. He really is one of the all-time greats, and several tracks on this release really drive that point home. Total respect for him as a songwriter. Okay, Primal Scream's fourth album, and my favorite by them, called Give Out, But Don't Give Up. If they made more records like this one, they'd be one of my favorite bands. It's got that Ragged Stones, Faces sound that I just love. Some real Tipsy Gypsy stuff going on here. In fact, It was recorded in Muscle Shoals to get that authentic sound, with like the Memphis horns playing on it and the Muscle Shoals rhythm section also playing on it.
Nice.
I own the original that came out on Creation, along with the absolutely essential double disc reissue called the Original Memphis Recordings. That has the original mix of the album and a bunch of outtakes on it. There is an excellent documentary on YouTube called The Memphis Tapes, and it's all about how they found the master tapes to this release, and the story behind it, and why George Drakoulis and George Clinton ended up remixing the album, which was originally mixed by Tom Dowd. Amazing footage of them recording it. Just such a great record. David Hood, Patterson Hood's dad, is in the documentary. He plays on this.
Oh, no way.
Yeah. And like they totally had respect for Primal Scream as songwriters, like all those Muscle Shoals dudes and Tom Dowd. So it's a really cool documentary and an amazing record. A while back, I went to the Comp Zone for a Beggar's Banquet comp called Spiked that had neo-psych bands from the 90s on it, and that's where I heard for the first time a band called The Dark Side, which is a Spaceman 3 spin-off. So I got this tape. It's like a sampler, I guess. That's how it was marketed anyways, called Guitar Voodoo. Heavy-duty wah-wah psychedelic rock. It's good. I couldn't remember where I heard that band, but I knew I'd heard of them, and the tape was $1, so The Dark Side.
Done.
Ryan, other than the Junkyard tape I mentioned last week, this next one might be my number one score on the tape haul. I've seen this band King Horse on gig posters, and their album had cover art by Pusshead. It came out on Caroline in 1990 and was produced by Glenn Danzig. So that has like...
Good pedigree.
Yeah, it's got all the triggers for me.
Yeah, right?
Yeah. So I've wanted to hear it for a while now. They were a one-and-done Louisville band, which is too bad because this totally rules. It didn't disappoint. The members all came up in hardcore. Found an excellent interview with vocalist Sean A. Garrison on the No Echo website, where they go through the whole history of the band. It's super interesting. He seems to suggest Glenn kind of diluted their sound, and the Pusshead cover art he thinks misrepresented the music, although he acknowledges that both of those things help them, get attention and sell records. Musically, they're more of a rock band with elements of metal and hardcore. They would have actually fit perfectly on a bill with Blast. Sean is a fantastic singer too. He kind of reminds me of Neil Fallon of Clutch a little bit. You should track this down, Ryan. I think you'd like it.
Yeah.
I'm very happy I found this.
That sounds cool.
Yeah.
I would agree.
Scottish band, Ryan. Balaam and the Angel. Ever heard of this?
No. And I just totally binged those Scottish docs a few weeks back, right?
Yeah. I've always seen them mentioned in the same circles as Early Cult, Sisters of Mercy, The Mission, and all these kinds of goth rock bands from the 80s, which is right in my wheelhouse, but I've never bothered to check them out. They're just one of those bands. There were a few of their tapes there, but I went with 1987's Live Free or Die, mainly because of the year and because of the cover art, which looks a lot like the Cult Electric cover art. I wouldn't be surprised if it's the same artist.
Barbarian clothing?
Not the clothing. It's kind of like the Celtic designs that frame the picture,
Yeah. I got you.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I mean, the band looks amazing, Totally kicking myself for not picking up the rest of the tapes that they had, because this is great. I was listening to this thinking to myself, there's no way some of these tracks weren't minor hits in the UK, but it appears as though that wasn't the case. Another band I'll be digging further into ASAP. The next tape I'll mention, Ryan, I snatched off the shelf so fast I nearly sprained my wrist. It's the Translator album, Evening of the Harvest.
Ah.
I talked about this San Francisco band a couple months back when I was talking about the Bill Kopp book, Disturbing the Peace, about San Francisco's 415 Records. Fell in love with this band after reading about them, and although I haven't heard all of their records just yet, I knew this one was considered a high watermark, and man, it's just great. produced by Ed Stasium. It's got a killer kind of live sound, very loose in the best way. You can tell by hearing it that they were for sure an amazing live band. I Need You to Love, the title track, Stony Gates of Time, easily the most listened to tape from the tape haul in the past 3 weeks. Love it.
Wow. Jayhawks. Oh, yeah.
I love them. And I actually didn't have a copy of Tomorrow the Greengrass in any other format. I've heard it a ton, and it's one of my faves, so happy to fill that hole in my Jayhawks collection. 6 Degrees of Genovation, Ryan?
From the Jayhawks?
Yeah.
You're giving me a 6 degrees test like right now?
Well, you're sick, so I'll take pity on you.
Don't tell people I'm sick when I'm doing the show, man. Well, I got to think it has something to do maybe via the Husker realm.
No, you're going to kick yourself when I tell you this.
Hold on. Don't just. I am not at my best right now. But hang on a second now. Jayhawks. What's the name of that band that down by the old mainstream? What's that record? That the Jayhawks guys are in with Soul Asylum guys. Oh man, I give up. Do it.
Gary Louris of the Jayhawks is in Golden Smog.
That's the band. I was almost there. Golden Smog. Damn it.
With Craig from the Westies.
Well, who else though was in Golden Smog?
Oh, lots of people.
Yeah, that can find their way to SST. There's got to be a few.
Yeah, well, it's kind of a Minneapolis supergroup, but and I think various Jayhawks have gotten up on stage with the Westies and vice versa as well. So, finally, Ryan, I picked up the first 2 albums by Warrior Soul. I love these records so much. 1989's debut, Last Decade, Dead Century, and the 1991 follow-up, Drugs, God, and the New Republic. Both of these albums are full-on classics. I never get tired of both of them. They're totally packed with 90s hard rock classics. One of those weird bands that didn't really fit anywhere. Kind of like Faith No More. Not musically speaking, like they don't sound like Faith No More, but I compare them to Faith No More in the sense that lots of, punks, just rockers, metalheads, and all points in between could be into Faith No More, but at the same time, they never really fit in with any scene.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yes, I do.
Warrior Soul's kind of like that with me.
When I was in high school, it was the metalheads that liked that band.
Yeah, they're not really a metal band, but like their first major tour was with Queensryche, and I love Queensryche, but that's a bad tour for Warrior Soul. And I think that's part of the reason they never got as huge as they actually should have been. They certainly had the songs. Both of these albums are just so chock full of absolute anthems to like disenfranchised teenagers. And they stand up today. These are unsung classics, both of these albums. And Corey Clark is still releasing music under the name Warrior Soul to this day. He just put out a new album that I haven't heard yet, but really happy to pick those up. And I've been listening to those quite a bit too the last week or so. That's part 2 of my tape haul, Ryan. What do you have?
Do you have a part 3?
I think,
or is that it?
I think. Well, I bought more tapes, but
oh well, you should probably back clean up next week. I like hearing about these. You've given me a couple more recommends. Back clean up next week, okay?
Maybe.
Oh, maybe. Leave me hanging. Well, I just have one spiel.
Well, here, Ryan, I'll give you one more real quick. Hold tight.
Okay.
Just let me grab this tape. This is kind of like the direction we'd be going next week if you wanted me to keep going. Can you see what that tape is?
Lizzie Borden. That's metal, right? Is that?
Yeah, that's metal. Yeah.
Yeah. People like metal who listen to the show. I like listening to you talk about it. Doesn't mean I'm going to check it out.
All right. What do you have?
All right. Well, first of all, you already told people that I'm sick. I'm sick as a dog this week, so I don't have a ton to go with. But you did give me some homework, and then I've got one spiel. So you asked me to go and look at Rick White's YouTube channel because I mentioned Eric's Trip,
right?
Elevator to Hell, Elevator Through, Elevator, and then also Rick White Plays the Sadies, a new record that Rick has put out. And I also mentioned his other new band, his hardcore band, Old.
Right.
Have you checked out Old yet?
No. Good reminder, though. But I was thinking, Ryan, I sent you the link to his YouTube page because it's not quite as obvious. Like,
No, I never would have found
you
it.
never would have found it. So
Nope.
did you actually take down the name of the YouTube page so we can tell people what we're talking about?
Yeah, it's called Headquake 137.
Right.
And yeah, I never would have found it. And it's a, when you look at the, I don't know, what do you call this? The emoji, the avatar for the page. It's just a picture of a cat.
Right.
And anyways, Rick White, mainstay of all those bands that I just mentioned. And check out that band Old, by the way, Brant.
Yeah, will do.
Hardcore.
Yep.
Anyways, Rick White from those bands, whom I've always loved and just recently got deeply back into. He's got this YouTube channel where he makes the scale model vintage trucks, turns them into radio control vehicles, models. He videotapes him creating them over dozens and dozens of hours from scratch, like by hand, totally. And then he drives them over this, terrain, and they are just spellbinding videos, and they have millions and millions of views.
It's pretty wild, right? I mean, like, the quality is unreal of what he builds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's I would never have taken the time or never sought it out, but I definitely watched a couple, and it was hard to look away. It's very, very cool.
Yeah, if anybody's checking it out, make sure you find one where he's making one of these things to, like, see the level of detail that he puts in. It's insane.
Very unexpected, as you said it would be. But just goes to show, someone who is very creative with music can be creative with a number of other things too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, here's my spiel. Only one this week. Maybe I'll do 1.5 real quick. I don't have much in the tank here, but anyways, it's funny you mentioned Shane MacGowan, and then what was the other Celtic band again that Kirk Kelly mentioned?
Black 47.
Black 47. Okay, because for my first spiel, we're going to go to Ireland, and we're going to go to the Hope Collective. This is a DIY collective from Dublin, inspired by the punk community. In 2017. The Hope Collective released a book to raise money for Syrian refugees called In Concert. Raised about 5,000 euros. Very cool group of people that do something like this. Got a bunch of contributors. And then I mentioned their book from 2020 on the show way, way back. They put out a book to assist NHS workers and patients during the COVID-19 pandemic. Mm-hmm. They raised 10,000 euros. And this one was about great gig memories from punks and friends. And if you recall, Chuck Dukowski contributed, so did Joey Shithead, and many, many more. Well, the Hope Collective have a new book out. It's as they call them, a benefit book. And when I saw this one, I went and bought this one so fast, I almost sprained my wrist, Brant. Anyways, it's designed to benefit and raise funds for the Red Cross Ukraine Refugee Appeal. And it's called Punks Listen. It's a collection of pieces of writing from musicians, writers, actors, and music fans. They were asked to write about a record or gig that was significant to them. And there's a few books like this out there. I've got a few. They're kind of hit and miss. Some stories are good. Some stories are kind of but given the cause behind this one, I'm all over it. Mm-hmm. And this one has contributors from Henry Rollins, Mike Watt, Hugo from Gang of Four, Tao Falco, Roger Miller from Mission of Burma, Dave Smalley, Jeff Pizzatti, Brendan Canty. The guys who compiled this one, Neil McGurk and Michael Murphy, definitely doing a good job on this. And people should go to hopecollectiveireland.com and check out all the good work that these punk rockers are doing out there.
Okay.
And then a quick follow-up to a spiel I did way, way back. Well, maybe not way back. Maybe about like a couple of months ago. I was talking about these new records coming out on Chris Schlarb's Big Ego Records. Mm-hmm. The new release from Mike Bagata, Mike Watt, and Jim Keltner is out. You can go and order that now, called Everywhere We Go. This is the follow-up to their Wall of Flowers LP, which I really dug.
Mm-hmm.
This is not the same combo as MSSV, Main Steam Stop Valve. This is the Bagata, Watt, and Keltner combo. But any of those Bagata Watt combos, I'm all in.
Yeah.
And you can go and order this one now. It sounds so good. And that's all I got, man.
Awesome. I'm going to check out that record and also that Rick White hardcore thing.
Old.
I'm on it.
Yeah. When you look at that Blue Fog record company website, which is putting out a lot of the Rick White reissues,
Yep.
and if you go to the Rick White Blue Fog Bandcamp and stuff, you can go and download like all of his hardcore music from before Eric's trip.
Yeah.
And now he's putting out a hardcore record.
Yeah, I haven't been on there for a while, but last time I was on that Bandcamp, there was a whole shitload of unreleased stuff from Elevator and Eric's Trip. And
it's endless.
Yeah.
It's endless. Well, part of when I got back into them over the last, mostly in the summer, I guess, is I rebought a bunch of their records because they reissued them on just juicy double LPs with a full second LP of bonus tracks.
Yeah,
and
I bought some of them too.
Yeah, it's pretty hard to resist.
Yep.
They're investments.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep. Right on. Let's get into this record for the last.
History Lesson, Part 1.
All right, here we are. We are in History Lesson Part 1. And Brent, we are not alone. We've got Jeff and Soraya from Paisley Stage Raspberry and Rhyme with us. So cool to have Jeff and Soraya on the show with us. You know, I've been listening to Paisley Stage off and on for the last couple of years, I guess, but I really I did a lot of homework this week because Jeff and Soraya have had last related members on their show like close to 10 times. You've had Joe Nolte on like 3 times. I better say this right. Vitas Matare. It probably just kills everyone when I say Matari, like a game console, but Matare. You've had Dave Nolte. You also did a focus on the Look Again record. You had Joe and Vitas on for the Look Again record. So you're definitely experts and very welcome on the show here. We are actually on your show, episode 167. We were so thrilled to do that and really appreciate you joining us. And Jeff and Soraya, let me just start by saying, officially, welcome.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be on the show.
Yeah, it's awesome. I just listened to the last episode. You did an acoustic Paisley Underground focus. But where are we now in the history of the last? We just had the last on as a most recent episode, I suppose, episode 189. We had the Confessions album. We had Joe Nolte on the show as a guest. And this, again, is shortly after, at that point, Joe and Mike, they decided, hey, let's get a band together again. And then they eventually said, well, we might as well call it the last. And they brought on Luke Lonez on guitar, Larry Mankey on bass, and Dave Naz from the Chemical People on drums. That Confessions record, there was Bill Stevenson at the board and producing on that one. Was Stefan Edgerton on that one too, or is he just joining on this record? I can't recall.
No, he was on that one too.
Yeah, so Billy and Stefan were on Confessions, and then it's basically like the same crew on Awakening. Very odd for the last to have that amount of people together associated with the last 2 records in a row. So really interested to get into this album. And of course, you know, very interested to discuss it with yourselves, Jeff and Soraya, as people who have probably dug way deeper on the last than we have thus far. People can go back to episode 189 and hear kind of the wind up to this version of the band. But before we do any of that, Brant, may I ask Jeff and Soraya some questions?
Yeah, please do.
Okay. So this is a new one for us. We've never really had on folks like yourselves as guests in History Lesson Part 1. And just for people who are not as familiar with yourselves, Jeff and Soraya, or your podcast, I wanted to ask a few kind of origin story questions. Can I do that?
Sure.
Okay. I'm going to start with Soraya because I could find more out about Jeff out there than Soraya. So I wanna start with Soraya, and I'm gonna ask you kind of the same questions before we get into talking about your show and its connection with the last, and then into this record. But Soraya, I'm interested to hear from you in terms of how did you get into music? How did this become something that you care about, something that you couldn't ignore, and it became such a big part of your life? Was there a song, a gig, a person? Because we've all kind of got our origin stories. I'd like to start with you.
Awesome. Thank you. So first of all, thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Brent, for having us on. My origin story is similar to a lot of other people's. I got into, especially the area that Jeff and I focus on in our podcast, The Paisley Underground, thanks to my big brother. My big brother was determined to change my musical taste and show me that my very narrow pop focus at the time could be expanded. So thanks to him, he exposed me to a lot of local music and a lot of great alternative music, alternative punk rock, and that's what got me started. And our podcast is focused on an LA scene that kind of gave birth to other things, and I've loved that music ever since, from high school moving forward. So I've always followed the scene, and I've always been passionate about music. And then meeting up with a group of friends, Jeff being one of them, you found your tribe, and you get to talk about different music and trade music and go to different shows. And, it was just great to find that. And that's kind of, the simple origins of my story.
Well, I got to ask you then, as a follow-up to one of your comments, what was like the local scene that you got into, the local bands way back when?
So I remember one of my first shows going, as, a high schooler, and my brother took me with him. I went to see the 3 o'clock. I remember seeing the Bangles early on. And, there were a limited number of clubs that I could go to just because of my age. My brother is 2 years older than me. So it was a lot of radio. So Rodney on the Rock exposed me to a lot of different things. And, and then like-minded friends, we started trading tapes and, tapes back then, tapes and LPs. And that was it.
So you're Paisley, like almost from the beginning. Like
It's
if you're
very
starting.
early.
Yeah. Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And Jeff, you're in San Diego, is that right?
Yes. So
Yeah.
North San Diego County.
Okay. But Soraya, you're not in San Diego?
I'm in
right?
Los Angeles.
You're in LA. Okay. So we've got LA and San Diego. Okay. Well, one of the things that strikes me when I listen to your show is just your connection to those local scenes. Just so cool to hear about your kind of your own origin stories, and then also to have all of these amazing musicians join you on your show. Now, Jeff, I was listening to it might have even been episode 1 or 2 in the last couple of weeks, and you seem to suggest that you started out as a metalhead. Like, is that fair? Tell us about that, and how did you turn Paisley?
Yeah, so that's definitely true. So, like Soraya, I got into music very early. I think my first purchase with my own money was like age 6 or 7, bought a 3 Dog Night single. And then years later, moving from Florida, where I was born, to Southern California, my older sister, who was 5 years older than me, she had a boyfriend who was into rock at the time, and he turned me on to Kiss. Gave me his Kiss collection as he kind of grew out of that, and I was still in that adolescent stage, and he was older. So Kiss was kind of my entryway into rock, and then from there it was Scorpions and Judas Priest and Ozzy, and I had the Ozzy shirt that had the death guy with holding Ozzy's head and a blade that was a cross and just dripping Ozzy's blood, and so it was all metal at the time. Went to see a lot of those concerts, Ozzy and in San Diego and whatnot, and definitely very much into music. And I was listening to local radio stations, and somehow I flipped onto a college radio station, which was called KKSM, our community college in the town that I lived in, Palomar Community College. And I liked that because I could call the radio station and request songs, and they would play it almost immediately. Whereas with the commercial radio stations, you couldn't get that kind of response. So at the time, Ramones had released the KKK Took My Baby Away song, which kind of was a transition from the harder edge guitar into more Paisley. So I kept calling the local radio station and requesting the Ramones KKK Took My Baby Away. And one time while I was waiting for that song to play, they played a song by the band The 3 O'Clock. All in Good Time was the name of that song. And it was on the compilation Radio Tokyo tapes. I called right away, and I just loved the song. Just caught me right away. Called the DJ. Art Deco was what he was going by. And I said, "Hey, Art, what's the song playing?" He's like, "Oh, it's the 3 O'Clock, All in Good Time. Get down to your local record store right now and get this compilation Radio Tokyo tape." And then that opened me up to the Paisley Underground and also to SST by way of the Minutemen, who were also on that compilation. So it went from the Ozzy, the Priest, Maiden, and just everything changed just with hearing that one song by the 3 O'Clock. And then from there it was Paisley Underground and the South Bay punk scene by way of the Minutemen.
Oh, that's a great story too, both of your stories. So now, for those who haven't dug into your show, and we've spoken about the Paisley Underground before on our show, but I'm going to toss it back over to you, Soraya, to maybe describe, we've heard from Joe in terms of how the Paisley Underground was kind of a reaction to the last, shall we say. But when we were on your show, Soraya, you were really good at describing, what is the true Paisley Underground. You struck me as a Paisley purist. And I'm wondering if you could maybe just give us a bit of background in terms of what is the Paisley Underground, how did it start, where did it go, and the big four, I think would be helpful for listeners to hear about.
Okay, so the Paisley Underground is a name given to a particular scene in Los Angeles in the early 80s. So we're talking about 81, 82. And the big four bands, and I am the purist, Jeff and I differ on this, but I am the purist, and Sid Griffin in John Doe's book from X, he says the seminal four are the Dream Syndicate, Rain Parade, 3 O'Clock, and the Bangles. That's kind of the core nucleus of the Paisley Underground scene here in LA. And why Paisley Underground? This was a group of bands that they had common ground because they were kind of reacting against, the LA scene at that time was more of a rock and steering towards metal. And then this group, they found that their roots were steeped in garage rock from the 60s and that kind of jangly pop. So Birds were a big influence, Love, and that kind of influenced their music and the direction they wanted it to go. So some called it like a revival of the 60s, of the psychedelic 60s. And that's definitely kind of in these early recordings of these bands. And then they start, expanding and developing.
Totally.
But that's really the essence or, core of Paisley Underground. Jeff, Would you add anything to that?
No, I think that's absolutely true. In my view, that's a snapshot of what happened at that particular time. My view expands after that particular burst. So where they influenced other bands who also, in my mind, became part of that scene. But she's absolutely right.
Yeah, no, thank you for that explanation. And it's so interesting, your description of that. It's very reminiscent of what we've heard from Joe Nolte from the last about how dissatisfied Joe was with the music of the time and was kind of reacting in creating the last. Now, Jeff, you mentioned this comp, Radio Tokyo tapes. I pulled out my Radio Tokyo tapes comps just as a few follow-up questions before we get into this actual Awakening record. Got Radio Tokyo tapes volume 2 here. And there's a band on there called 17 Pygmies. Now, I wonder, Jeff, you have a relation to 17 Pygmies, do you not?
Absolutely, yeah. So it was actually because of that record, too. So both of those records. So the first Radio Tokyo tapes has a band called Savage Republic on there. So every band from that compilation ended up being huge to me. I devoured that Radio Tokyo tapes compilation. and pretty much went and got everything from every band on there. So Savage Republic was a band that was on there, and I went out and got all their stuff at the time, which wasn't much. But what happened with that band out of Los Angeles, they were based out of UCLA. They were art students that were, much like the Beatles, they were art students that also got into music as well. I can't believe I just compared Savage Republic to the Beatles. But anyways, so they were an industrial band out of Los Angeles. And there was some differencing of opinion between the two main people in the band, Bruce and Phil. And Phil broke off and did his own band, 17 Pygmies. So I bought all of their stuff as a result of those two albums, Radio Tokyo Tapes 1 and 2, that had their song Chameleon on there. And there was a telephone number on their album, so I called the number, and just because the band was really mysterious to me and I wanted to find out about the band, so I called, and the main guy, Phil, answered the telephone. And I said, yeah, I just bought your album. The band is very mysterious. I want to find out more about them, more about you guys. Can you tell me about the band? So he started telling me about the band, but he seemed to be more interested in me than I was in him. And I'm just a kid, listening to music on college radio station, community college radio station at that. So he started asking about me, and I told him I was in a band called White Glove Test. And he said, well, I have a record label. We have a spot open. We're looking for somebody. What can you tell me about your band? So I said, well, we have a demo, and I sent him a demo. He called me back after he heard the demo, and he said, we'd like to see you guys play, me and the co-owner, Matt, and we're interested in putting your band out on a record label. Long story short, they ended up putting out 2 of my band's records, White Glove Test. After those records came out, I ended up having children, getting married, so I stopped playing music. 10 years later, he was reforming 17 Pygmies, which, before they broke up, had a couple that were married. By this time, they were divorced and couldn't work together, so they needed a guitar player. So Phil kindly asked me to join the band, 2007. So a band that I grew up loving, 17 Pygmies, I ended up becoming a member of much later, when my kids became older and didn't want dad around anymore. So back into music and became a member of 17 Pygmies from 2007 until Phil's passing a couple months ago. So for many years, was part of that band. And all of that was a result of Radio Tokyo Tapes.
I know, right? Amazing story. Hey, quick follow-up, though, on White Glove Test. I had not heard of that band before, and I was checking them out this week. Firmly 80s sounding for sure, but some decent tunes, actually. Like, there's some great songs there, but the thing that struck me the most, well, a few things. So Ethan James produced the first record, right? And I think Bruce Leiker did the artwork or the cover for that. Is that right?
Yep, absolutely correct. Yeah. And the cassette was like a letterpress printing, and that's what Savage Republic was known for. Like I mentioned, they were mainly art students. So, yeah, and interestingly enough, to tie into the last, Richard Andrews was our engineer, who also engineered Confession and Awakening. So he worked on our first record. So
totally. And what about the second one? Who produced your second White Glove Test record?
So that would be Vidas Matere. So, yeah, we were huge fans of the last, then and today still. And we were able to record in his studio, and it was an amazing experience. I specifically remember, I'm not a bass player, but on one song, our bass player wanted to play guitar. He wrote a song. And so he asked me to switch to bass, and I said, okay, I'm a guitar player trying to play bass, and I was struggling trying to lay down the bass part because I don't play. And I'm in the recording with the band. We did all the basic tracks as a group, but I was the one who kept messing up. So they kept all of their tracks, and Vidas pulled me aside, and he said, Jeff, you're struggling with this. Let's see if we can't work with you individually and see if we can get your part. He pulled me in, and he gave me a different bass guitar. I was trying to play a Rickenbacker bass. He said, no, here, try this. And he gave me a bass, sat me in the studio, and he said, okay, let's take some deep breaths. We'll send the band out to get lunch, and just you and I here. And one track, I laid down the bass part, which ended up being a song called Every Day. And Vitas made that all happen. So I have very, very fond memories of working with Vitas.
So cool. And you didn't do that song on a Rick though, right? You tried the Rick, different, because a Rick bass is it's like a wrist shredder, you know?
I couldn't do it.
I got you. Now, a couple of quick follow-ups there too. I do love, if I'm right, that your first album by White Glove Test was called Look.
Correct.
And your second one was called Leap. So
Yep.
you looked before you leaped?
Yeah, indeed. Yeah.
Love
We're
that.
trying to be clever, and we had an EP that that never got released until actually put it out last year on Bandcamp only. But it was an EP, and I was trying to push for the band to call it Before You, and they said no, that's just way too heavy-handed. Look and Leap is good enough. So yeah.
Perfect. And now you also, actually, Soraya, you brought this up on your last episode, but our listeners should be made aware of this too. Jeff, you've got a new proj that is going to come out like any day now, maybe actually around the time when this episode comes out, called Brenneman, and an EP called Marcos. Why don't you tell people about that?
Yeah, so this is probably my swan song. So I was already, once Phil passed away from 17 Pygmies, I was already thinking, all right, I've got 13 grandchildren, 5 great-grandchildren, and just time is in a place where I need to reprioritize. So my buddy, Dirk Doucette, talked me into getting back into a studio, and he said, let's, for your last album, let's record some songs where you're singing. I said, Dirk, I don't sing. You know this. Nobody wants to hear me singing. He said, well, it'll just be for you and I. Nobody will ever hear this, and it'll be 10 to 12 songs. And I said, well, I have some songs, but let's see what we can do with them. Inspired by REM, writing songs about your local area, I decided to write songs that me and my friends growing up in North San Diego County, locations that meant a lot to us, including the record store that really inspired my love of music, a record store called Sand Hill, which I would go into and work at. So we started, the two of us, just recording songs, and it was all me to a click track, coming in with progressions on my guitar and some rough ideas for where they would go lyrically and melodically. And most of the recordings were, I would say, inspired by the Minutemen and Meat Puppets, at least in my mind. I was going for that kind of feel. We ended up doing 6 songs. San Marcos was the name of the town that we grew up in, so we called it Marcos, just for short, kind of the Econo version of San Marcos, if you will. And it got to a point where I thought, he's making them sound okay, despite me screaming on these. And it ended up being a lot heavier than I had in mind. And then we reached out to some musicians that I really admire, including Matt Devine from a band called Permanent Green Light, and he played in a band called Medicine. He agreed to play lead guitar, and then a couple people from the Dream Syndicate, who we love and are part of the scene. Jason Victor played lead guitar, and Chris Kakovez, their keyboard player, played on all 6 songs. And then I had Jonathan Siegel from Camper Van Beethoven play a couple violin tracks, which blew me away. And Red Cross, a punk band out of the Bay Area here. We had Robert Hecker, who was part of their glam period. He played on 3 different songs. So it was amazing for me to have these musicians that I really admire come in and play on it. So November 18th is the release date, and it's coming out on Bandcamp, and it should be on Amazon and Spotify and all those. So
yeah, the one track that's out there, Sand Hill, the first lyrics are again about that record store, right? The lyrics are vinyl. I'm digging crates, that smell, it's like a drug. And yeah, I would agree. One final question though about Paisley Stage, Raspberry and Rhyme. Am I the only person in the world that didn't realize until like this week that seems like a Scarborough Fair take? Is that what that's from? Is that a Scarborough Fair take?
It absolutely is, yeah. So, yeah, the lyrics in there are parsley, sage, rosemary, and thyme, and we were definitely playing off of that. When we came up with that, we thought, no, this is not good. But it's one of those things, like after repetition, you hear it for a while and it kind of grows on you. But yeah, you're absolutely right, Ryan.
Unlike our podcast name, which will never grow on brand.
Right.
It's my if I done anything to annoy Brant, it's to name this podcast. Well, there we go. So thank you for indulging. I wanted to get a bit more familiar with how you come to the scene and then your relationship with The Last, because again, you definitely have spent a lot of time with those musicians, and we're very lucky to have had you do that, because those documents are there to go and listen and understand what was going on. You didn't actually, though, spend a lot of time on this release. When you've had, Joe on, he really kind of cruises right past this record. So really interested to get into it a bit more deeply with yourselves and hear what you think about it. So where should we go from here, Brent?
I think we should go back to Ozzy and the Big Four and stuff, because
Do you want to skate past it too?
Yeah. Well, let's get
Motorhead will come up in this discussion. I will say that.
Oh, well, let's get into that then.
So when you go track by track, there's one of these tracks that Joe claims was influenced by Motorhead. So.
Oh, okay, cool. Well, so just to set the stage a little bit, we touched on this a little bit, but this was the second of their late 80s comeback. Same lineup as the previous record, same studio, Third Wave in Torrance, same producer, Bill Stevenson, engineered by James B. Mansfield. And we saw James before on episode 196, the Paul Roessler Abominable record. He also worked with the Chemical People on Tenfold Hate, Allroy's Revenge, both of which were done in the same studio by this same crew, like around this time. We mentioned Richard Andrews. He engineered Confession along with Stefan. Stefan also works as an engineer on Awakening, and Richard is credited as an additional engineer. So virtually the same people. They worked on this one October of 88 through April of 89. Confession was recorded in February of 88. So they really weren't wasting any time. I bet this came out less than a year after Confession. Now, according to the band, I've read this in a few different places, and maybe Joe touched on this in our interview and maybe in yours as well, or one of yours. This was like the most expensive record SST ever made. Do you know anything about that?
I was reading something about that, and I think the reason is they were talking about, Bill was mentioning with Confessions that it would have been a little bit better had they did some double vocal tracks. So I think they did a lot of that on Awakening, so much so that they spent a lot of time in the studio. Yeah, and Brent, I heard the exact same thing. So much studio time that it cost SST more than any other record, at least up to that time. So it definitely affected their budget, and eventually the last touring schedule, because there was not even money to send them out on tour, because they were in the studio so much doing all the double tracking for vocals.
Interesting. Now, you've talked to Joe way more than we have, but tell me if you agree with the statement I'm going to make that he's like, I think he's a perfectionist, and it seems like he is super critical of, it seems like he's like a tortured artist in the sense that he's never satisfied with, like, I don't think he is, I'm sure there's stuff in the Last's catalog that he likes better than other things, but I feel like nothing is perfect on his end.
I definitely agree with that statement. And in talking with Joe, Jeff and I have had Joe on a few times. And Joe Nolte will talk at length about, it just seems like he's trying to have the sound that's recorded equate the sound that's in his head that is playing at full blast. And I think tortured perfectionist might be it. Because you see the joy that he has when he's playing. Jeff and I have seen them live, and they're amazing. But yeah, and then when you hear the backstory, you say, wait, it sounded great. No, but this and that, and I would have adjusted this, and it could have sounded better.
Right.
And, yeah.
For me, this record sticks out in particular in their catalog because of the vocal performances on it. It's just out of this world on this record. And I mean, they're great on all the records, but you can tell they spent some extra time on this one.
I feel like maybe that's why he would have breezed past this one on your show anytime it's come up, because I think this is one for him that there's just bad memories maybe connected to it. I think the band kind of splintered after this, and I think if I'm remembering right, I've heard him say like the tour for this record was a bit of a disaster in his mind.
Yeah, and I think lack of funds had something to do with that, and it was because of too much studio time.
Yep.
It's funny when you talk about the crew in the studio, working the board, twisting the knobs, turning the dials, and you mention the Chemical People, and then of course you've got Bill and Stefan. This record, for me, it is aesthetically, the sound quality is very similar to the All and Chemical People records of that time. They sound like they were recorded like back to back in the same studio. The way that the snare sounds, the way that the guitars are mixed, very, very similar. There's even songs when we get into the tracks and I'm like, this could have been an All song almost.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would definitely think that Bill would have a big influence on that.
For sure.
Well, and I mean, he's gone on record many, many times as saying The Last was a huge influence on him. So not, it makes sense that it would, you said that some of these could be an All track. Well, Bill being a songwriter, was greatly influenced by The Last.
Yeah.
Jeff and Soraya, do you think The Last get the credit they deserve in kind of the scene? Like, I feel like they're outside of, those bands, some of those bands you mentioned, like the Dream Syndicate. I don't think they're considered peers to those bands, but I'm sure, like, do you think, all those bands you've talked to, all those people, do they mention The Last? Does their name come up? Yeah.
Every single one of them. All four of those bands said that they were influenced. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, Soraya, at least one member from each of those bands have tried out at one point or another to join The Last.
Yeah.
Yep, including Susanna Hoffs from the Bangles. Steve Wynn wanted to be a part of the band. Michael Quercio has mentioned that. So, yeah, that's actually the reason why we started digging more into them, because all four of those bands have mentioned what a huge influence The Last was. And to answer your question, Brant, absolutely not. They do not get the credit that they deserve. And I think Joe would agree with that. He's mentioned that as such. And rightly so, because so many of those bands were hugely influenced by The Last, and many bands. And I think it's, you could say, much like Big Star was at one point, where there was all these bands that were influenced by them,
Totally.
And they never got the credit that they deserve. It's a little bit different nowadays, but the Replacements, REM, Let's Active, all these bands were so influenced by this one band, but they never got the credit, and I would equate that to The Last, absolutely.
Oh, man, that might be the first Let's Active mention on You Don't Know Mojack. Thank you, Jeff. Finally. Thank you.
I just want to add, one of the times that we had Joe Nolte on, he said, well, you have me to thank for the Paisley Underground. and it's because he said, people would approach and would say, no, we're going to go in another direction. And then he said, and then they'd form a band, and then boom, they hit it big.
Yeah.
He said, so, but it's interesting how The Last is really this catalyst for so many of these bands, because they dig into The Last and then they take a turn and they start developing their own music. They start writing differently. And I am absolutely in agreement with that statement. The Last does not get their due. But now look through so many different interviews and people say, LA Explosion, The Last, that kind of got me digging into different bands. So it's there, but maybe it is, Jeff, kind of like a Big Star thing, that there's going to be some distance and then people will give them their due. I don't know. Well,
yeah, I mean, they predate all of those bands for starters. And I mean, they were on SST, which is another kind of, I'd be curious to know who they played with around this era, when they were on tour. Was it more bands like the Meat Puppets? You would frequently see these SST bands get paired up with other SST bands. Or was it, were they playing with some of those Paisley bands? Probably a bit of both, I guess. Yeah,
I'm curious too. I don't honestly know that. I do remember seeing some flyers where they were listed with some of the SST bands, but Yeah, that's a very good question. I would like to know more about that also.
Yeah.
Should we talk about these tracks a little bit?
Yes.
History lesson, part 2.
All right, so let's just go through them. Track 1, side 1, No Love is a Joe Nolte song. Right out of the gate, Joel just belting it out over the 12-string. A typical last album opener, just a total corker. What do you guys think of that track?
I love the song myself. This is a song that actually took me a while to grow on. I'm a real fanatic about sequencing. And originally, I thought this is not a great way to start the album. I wish track number 2 would have started the album, but it grew on me a lot more so, to the point where I love how it starts. And when the last brings in 12-string guitar, I just love that sound with the band, because they're high energy and yet they have this instrument that's usually more twee part of bands where it's more pretty sounding, but they'll bring it into their high energy music. Joe said he wrote the song in May of 1985, so it's a little bit older, and he said it was an homage to the Doors. I don't know if I hear that, but but yeah, it's grown on me to be a great way to start this album.
Great hook, though. The guitar line is a great hook.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Well, and don't forget, there was a time where there was discussion about, I believe, Joe either playing or singing or both in Black Flag, and he was to play a 12-string in Black Flag.
Can you imagine?
Yeah.
I can't.
Well, Soraya, sometimes when I listen to your show, you kind of dig more into the lyrics.
Yeah.
Has been my experience in listening to the show. Can you find any connection between the lyrics and the Doors maybe in this song? I don't know.
I don't. Joe says that musically this is an homage to the Doors, and then he says lyrically this song is about nothing. It's officially about nothing. So I don't know, but one of the things that I love about Joe's songs is there's always something, the hook. So in this one it's the guitar hook, or the lyrics just get you. But I just love this line. What you do depends on you. I've got a reason for telling you why is it wrong with me, and you, why is it wrong with you? I'm sorry. That I just like that. but to say lyrically it's officially about nothing, I don't know if I buy that. That Doors homage, maybe I got to give it 10 more listens. I don't know. I'm not too sure.
Okay, well, the next one, Assembly Line, that one's not lyrically about nothing. I can't tell if it's a criticism of mindless factory work or, the somewhat freeing aspect of shutting off your brain and pushing a button. It could be either, I guess, depending on your perspective.
Yeah, so we do know that Joe was a blue-collar worker up until his retirement last year. So he's always been part of that 9-to-5 working man life. And I think it's come out in a few different songs, Assembly Line, no exception for that. So it's definitely, I think, based on his real life experience. And I think you're absolutely right, Brant, because I know he's mentioned that he does not have a love for that 9-to-5 work. It's something to pay the bills. His love is for music. So I think you're spot on in saying that you have to shut off your mind and just do what you have to do to pay the bills.
Yeah.
Just soaring vocals on this track, though, right? Like, so they make your hair stand up when you hear this song.
Yeah.
And tell me that this rhythm, the rhythm of this song, wouldn't fit on like All's album Percolator or something like that. Like this is like the Percolator rhythm, this song.
I can hear that.
Yeah.
A thing I found interesting about this song is it's Mike singing the verses, and it's a Joe Nolte song. Is that not odd?
That is odd, yeah, because we know that Joe likes to sing his songs and Mike likes to sing his songs for the most part. There's definitely exceptions, so yeah, absolutely. And I still kind of think this would be a great way to start the album, Assembly Line, personally, for exactly what Ryan said. I mean, just the delivery is just amazing, and just it just gets you right away. So I like albums that start off and they just grab you right away. So No Love took me some time. Assembly Line got me first listen.
Okay, well, sequencing wise, you have to put like a hit on track number 3.
Okay.
I think. And you do. And this one's a hit. The next one, You. I love that, like, the first minute is Joe singing a verse, just, accompanying himself on guitar. I assume it's himself. Just a classic kind of lost relationship banger, I would say.
And 12 string again.
Yeah, I like how they layered the guitars on this. It sounds to me like they have the acoustic pan to the right and that distorted guitar pan to the left, and then you'll occasionally hear that 12 string faintly down the middle. That's a total 60s production trick.
Absolutely. And I think this is one of the songs that was written after Confession, so it was written just before they were re-recorded. And I think there was a few songs on here that were, like you mentioned previously, Brant, that there wasn't much time in between Confessions and Awakening. And he just nailed out some of these tracks. There were a few that were older, but this is one of those songs where write them and record them. Mm-hmm. Let's release this. So
some serious growl on the vocals for this song too, right? Like they mean it.
Yeah.
And he's great when he does that. And we were reading that he had an earlier song that he took some of the verses and ended up using that for Going On. And then the chorus from that earlier song he used for this song. So there was a song that he had written previously and split that up into a couple different songs. The chorus becoming You.
I just wanted to add, to, you've got these driving lyrics, but it's like a twist of the knife every time, right?
Yeah.
And now outside, night is falling, see them dancing in the rain. They dream the only dream that's left, to die before they go insane. It's all preordained, and they call to you. Oh my God. It's like, whoosh. All of this is just, it's gone. It's over. Get out. Yeah, but it grips you, and it does. If this is the hit, hats off, because it's hard to shake this one off.
Yeah.
I think we've said this before on the last episode, Confession, just how the lyrics can be dripping with venom. Some of these, right? Like, there's no pure love song from Joe Nolte. Not yet, anyways.
Not yet. Not yet.
The next one, Somebody New, is a Mike song. Practically the first half of the song, just Mike on vocals with keys. The way the band comes in just gives this track, to me, like a totally epic feel, especially when you add Vitas on flute. Such a cool touch. Made me think of like Led Zeppelin 3 or something like that, even though I'm not sure they used flute anywhere other than on Stairway. So, but this has to be a standout Mike song on any Last album, I would say.
And written on accordion, which I thought was interesting, I think all of the songs that he wrote for this album were written on accordion, which is obvious, I think, on a later one, but not so obvious on this one, in my opinion. But Vitas coming in on flute, definitely, for me, was very nostalgic of the earlier days, and especially the song It Had to Be You, which was on the compilation that we talked about earlier, Radio Tokyo tapes, but the LA Explosion songs, to me, that was very nostalgic to hear Vitas on flute again with Somebody New.
Well, that was the interesting thing that Joe said when he heard the song, he heard flutes. And so he wanted Vitas on it, and they approached him, and boom, there you go. So, again, going into, I hear it in my head, I want to hear it on the track. And I don't know, it's good. It's a good song too.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Even though he wasn't officially a member of the band at this point, so pulled Vitas back into it. I think I know that their relationship is very interesting between the two of them. So to bring him back, I think meant a lot to Joe to have Vitas back, because I know he definitely appreciates and respects Vitas very much.
Okay, the next track is Garden Grows. Back to it, another Joe song. Talking about sequencing, perfectly sequenced to put this song next after, Mike's song, I would say. We've got Leo Nolte on piano, which I think is actually Joe's name. I think, and actually I know it is, because he told me his full name is Leo Joseph Nolte III, which is the same as obviously his dad and his dad's dad. And he actually told me Joseph is the middle name of all 5 of the Nolte boys, as well as David Nolte's son, James.
Wow, that I did not know that.
Yeah. He told me since I didn't usually take credit for piano work, I thought I'd credit myself as Leo as sort of a tip of the hat to my dad.
Oh, that's very special.
Nice.
This is actually my favorite song on the album.
Really?
It just really grabs me. I think melodically, it's just one of those songs that just stand out right away for me. I absolutely love this song. And he said that the lead guitar was an homage to Jefferson Airplane's Volunteers, which I thought was interesting. I don't know if I necessarily hear that, but I love how he has these influences, much like the Paisley Underground, of these 60s bands. And I think the influences are obvious that there are 60s influence. Some of the specific influences, I don't know that I necessarily hear like Joe hears.
I trust your judgment. I'm not a guitar player.
I love this song because it's my favorite bass playing song. The bass playing on this song is just killer. It's just like ultra tasty lines and hitting up in the high notes. Loved it. I'll always pick that out on a last record, like because there's such it doesn't seem to be like a main focus in the writing, but there's always a cool lick. And I think it's because like the songwriters create a great space for a bass player to throw in a really wicked lick that just does it for me.
Okay.
I love that.
Observation. Yeah.
The next one, last one, side A, is Your Wings, another Mike song. I forget what I said 2 tracks ago about, Mike's, that being Mike's like big song, because this is the Mike Nolte epic for me.
This is weird, this song, right?
Yeah.
It is weird, yeah.
I love the dynamics in it that they use.
To me, it's an odd way to end side 1, but it makes sense when you flip the record over to the next track. But it's an odd tune. It's a very odd tune, and Mike has said that he was writing it from the perspective of his brother Joe, saying, why are you wasting your life away? And it was in response to a Joe song, The Other Side, which I thought was interesting, and another song written on accordion. So, and apparently influenced by Badfinger's Carry On. I don't know if you guys, another one where I thought, okay, I believe you. I don't hear it, but I believe you.
Okay, well, flipping it over, another Mike track here, to me, he shows he can rock too.
Yes.
But when I listen to this, I feel like it could have been a mainstream 80s like pop crossover hit almost. Like it almost sounds like a New Romantic track to me.
No, man, this sounds like the Dickies to me.
Dickies.
Oh yeah, because it has like a Dickies feel, but New Romantics maybe.
I love that the accordion actually shows up in the song too.
Yeah.
And you can hear Mike's frustration in the song, I think. But yeah, Brant, you actually absolutely hit it. Like he rocks on this one. So after hearing Your Wings and then flipping it over, and definitely comes in with more of a harder edge, and not quite as hard as we'll get to in a couple songs on Joe's song, but yeah.
Definitely. And I mean, these lyrics. Okay, so we go from Your Wings, right? And then we jump here, and you say life's impossible when you get too close to someone you gotta pay. Spend your whole life miserable, fighting demons, fighting thoughts you hate. All's told in your book of life. Coming in deep, but like hard too. It's a great song.
Yeah. Okay, next up we have a Joe song, Dreaming. Cool track. To me, almost could be like an early Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers song. Has that kind of feel to it for me. I mean, Tom Petty, played a 12-string and had some definite 60s vibes in his early stuff too.
Yeah, and this song was a little bit older. Like I think it was about 3 or 4 years old. It was one of the songs that he had written when the band was going by the Nolte Brothers after Vetus had left the Last, and they were doing their own thing. So it was, it was definitely one of those songs. And interesting that you brought up Tom Petty. Yeah, I mean that 12-string intro. I absolutely love the intro to the song and just that sound before it actually kicks in. But
Right.
I would have never thought of Tom Petty, but I think you nailed it with that.
Yeah. It's a good connection.
And David actually sings with Joe on this song too. So I think the Nolte brothers are all present in here. I think Mike's in there too. So I know David isn't fond of singing all the time, so I think Joe probably had to coerce him into singing.
The next one is Tired, another Joe track. I think the last two are Joe songs. This must be the Motorhead one.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Probably one of their heaviest songs, I would say, and definitely their more punkier songs. A total SST song, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, this is maybe what Black Flag would have sounded like if Joe would have been their vocalist.
Yeah, I think you nailed it there. And I know that there were several songs at this time that he was writing to somebody that he was pursuing, a female that he notes as just H, the initial H. So I think he said that the song was written for her, whoever that is. I think he's pretty elusive about who H is. But yeah, Motorhead, huh? Like in the last song. But it's interesting. We were talking about sequencing earlier, how we go from this song to the next song after such a heavy, fast influence song, and then what comes up next.
Yeah, well, speaking of that and sequencing, if you take the two covers off the end of this, which I probably would have.
Me too.
This ends this record would end the same as Confession, with kind of the title track being a stripped down track to end the record. That's the exact same way Confession ended, I believe.
Yep, you're right.
This is an epic track.
I wonder if Joe played solo acoustic shows. Do you know?
I know he played shows with Mike as Joe and Mike, but I don't know that he ever played completely by himself. I'm not aware of any of those. But with the two of them, I know he did some of that.
And this one has Dave on lead guitar, this track.
Yes. Soraya and I are very fond of David Nolte.
Absolutely.
Too. Very, very nice person. And I think there's a note somewhere that I wrote down that I read somewhere that on David's electric part, that there's a descending part, and he's actually detuning his guitar. He's not actually going down the fretboard, but he's actually detuning, which is an interesting sound. Yeah.
Joe mentioned it when he was on your show about how it was that's the dive bomb sound. It's actually just down tuning, and Joe was saying, but we should have put some bass on this track. But no, I like it just as is. Of course, he's unsatisfied. I love it. The vocals are amazing. And I love that dive bomb guitar track. It just adds to it for me.
Yeah, totally. I'm totally with you there, Ryan.
Once again, here's where we see the magic of the Nolte brothers, right? And all of them different musicians, all of them bringing something new here. And to me, David's guitar work is just amazing on this track.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's such a solid song. Okay, so Jeff, would you agree? Should the album have stopped here?
Yeah, I was going to bring that up from the beginning, and I thought for sure I was going to be hated for this, and I was going to be the standout lone guy saying that the album shouldn't end with these two covers. But it sounds like I'm not alone here. Soraya, you might differ.
No, I'm okay. I actually seem to agree, but I like knowing that there's a cover. I know it's there, but I agree. Awakening would have been that kind of nail coffin done. And then we get these two covers.
Yeah.
Okay?
So odd.
They're odd covers.
Like that final statement of Awakening, and then they tack these on.
No, it's such a strong song, and then you move me in a completely different direction. So at the end of the album, the secret, folks, I usually stop listening at Awakening.
Yeah. What if these would have been mixed into the album?
Like sequenced differently?
Sequenced earlier?
Yeah. Like, do you like them as covers, at least?
No, they're good covers.
Yeah.
They're good. I don't know if I would have ended on this note. Even though I love these two songs, they're good songs, but to end it?
Yeah.
Because Jeff and I always talk about how, with sequencing, that last song is that lingering reminder, right? Like, hey, we just spent, X amount of time listening to this album, and it stays with me. And this one, I'm just kind of left going, what was this about?
Okay, so
But-
so for our listeners, the two covers that ended are "She Loves You" by the Beatles and "Baby It's You" written by Burt Bacharach, Luther Dixon, and who was credited as Barney Williams as a writer, and lyricist Mac David, which was also recorded by the Beatles. This song, which is, maybe
Okay.
maybe how they learned it, but
So Joe says, for She Loves You, he says, this was crammed into a last-minute chaotic flurry of activity wherein we were struggling to finish the album before the upcoming All tour. So I'm like, okay.
yeah.
So-
Well, I hit up Joe and asked him, why did you choose these covers, and was it a conscious decision you made to put them at the end of the album, or why did you make that decision? He said the answer to both questions is sheer idiocy. Unfortunately, that idiocy would be mine. He said we had done She Loves You well in practices, giving it sort of a hardcore treatment while effectively nailing those amazing harmonies. By the time we got around to recording those two, we were pretty much out of time, and I regrettably pushed to do them anyway. We did them both badly and threw them onto the end of the record, hoping no one would notice.
We noticed.
Yeah.
We know. I don't think they're badly recorded at all. I think they're pretty decent recordings. I think the performances are pretty inspired, I would say. You could tell Joe's love for the Beatles. I think he's mentioned that She Loves You is his all-time favorite song, maybe.
Yes.
So I don't think they're bad. I would like to hear them on some kind of a compilation, maybe, or a tribute, maybe like a punk rock Beatles tribute album. But they feel tacked on to me.
Yeah.
So I don't want to call Joe Nolte an idiot, but I might agree with him. I won't say that, but
Well, then
flat out, I would agree with him. I might nod in agreement.
Yeah.
That maybe it wasn't the best decision.
It was just, they seem rash, just kind of quick. That sounds good. Let's do it. Bum, 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 done. But how do you not love his own? Okay, so I love people who write great songs. I love harmonies, and I like Burt Bacharach. And even Joe says about "Baby It's You," the second cover, great song. Don't say nothing bad about my Bacharach. So Joe just got a little space in my heart right there. But again, it just seems odd. So I don't know. Maybe if they were sequenced earlier, it wouldn't have felt so jarring.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, and in the same breath, when I talked to him, he went on to crap all over the album cover too, saying, again, blaming himself, saying he picked the worst photo of the band, and he picked I believe he described it as putrid purple.
The colors.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
he signed my cover, and he writes on here, "Bad colors, oops," is what he wrote when he signed it. So that's how he signed my
Jeff,
my
is yours a cutout on the side there?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Okay, yours too, Brent, right?
Cut out. Yep.
Yeah, mine too. Mine has got a half moon shape in the corner. So all three of ours are cutouts.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Dun, dun.
Interesting. Yeah.
Wow.
I don't
But
mind this photo. I think it's a great photo of the band. They're all smiling.
The photo's good. The colors, leave a little something to be desired. I think, as you, Jeff and Soraya, mentioned with Joe on your show, this is maybe just not as good of a cover as the Confessions cover, which is an amazing cover, right? That shot, if you put that shot next to this one does pale in comparison.
Agreed. I
Yeah.
agree with you.
Yeah.
It looks like the lyrics were done on a super early computer. Like, that's not a typewriter.
It does look kind of dot matrix,
Yeah.
a little bit.
That's the
Yeah.
word.
Commodore,
for sure.
Commodore 64, I'm sure.
Oh, we're 64.
What about this quote on here from Nathaniel Hawthorne? Does anybody know anything about that?
I don't. No.
I don't know what kind of a teacher you are, Soraya, but I've heard that maybe you're a teacher and maybe you might know something. Any chance there?
Well, read the quote because I don't have a physical copy of the album.
Oh, okay. Here we go. Okay. I usually do these. I was actually going to toss it to you in case if you wanted to go in teacher mode. But here we go. This is from Nathaniel Hawthorne, American author from December 1844. At least that's what it says on here. And here's the quote: "Blessed are all simple emotions, be they dark or bright. It is the lurid intermixture of the two that produces the illuminating blaze of the infernal regions."
That's deep.
That is deep.
So, for your listeners, I am a Spanish professor, so I teach literature and culture and language. But I read a lot, and that quote by Nathaniel Hawthorne. I mean, this is just me riffing. I definitely would have to ask Joe why that quote, but that's about kind of the eternal struggle of life, of all the highs and lows, and we're constantly kind of dipping into all of that. It's a lot of the duality of life, but
the dark or bright,
or
bright, right? Yeah, and he's talking about the lurid intermixture. And I took from it, just the first line, "Blessed are all simple emotions." It's like those instinctual, reactionary emotions are maybe the purest of all. I don't know.
Yeah. And I mean, we definitely have tracks that reflect that. The strong emotions just pour out. We definitely have tracks about that. And some, the lurid is some of the fantasy. So, there's a little bit of that too.
Mm-hmm. It seems though, in that the last two words, or the last piece though, of the infernal regions, it seems like Joe toils in the infernal regions from time to time.
I'd say so.
Yeah. When you were reading that quote, Ryan, I was definitely thinking, like, this sounds a lot like Joe in the discussions that he's had with us, and then the discussion that he had with you. There's kind of that. I know that he's proud of the band, but I know that he wishes that the band would have been more recognized, to Brant's point, that they are not recognized as much as we believe that he should.
At the time, too, right? Because, like, look, all three of our copies are cutouts.
Yeah.
Like, come on. Did these even hit the shelves in a meaningful way? I don't know.
Well, the good news is this is streaming, this album, so everyone who's listening to this can hear it. And
they should.
Yeah.
They should, yeah.
Hey, where does this record stack up for everybody with the rest of the last catalog? Like, full disclosure, I've never even heard Gin and Innuendos. Never heard it.
What? That's Jeff's favorite.
It is.
You need to.
Yeah, well, I'm holding off. I can't wait. Mojack bylaws, right?
I can't wait for You Don't Know Mojack episode 323, which is going to come out probably in the year 2050. So I'm looking forward to that one for sure. Yeah. So for me, this is probably my third or fourth. Gin and Innuendos is definitely my favorite, and LA Explosions is great. And Look Again, since they've redone that one's great too. But so the last did 3 SST releases, right? We're talking about Confession. You guys talked about Confession, and Awakening, and then at some point Gin and Innuendos. So I think out of these, out of the SST, it's probably my least favorite of the SST releases, maybe. Gin and Innuendos is definitely my favorite. Confessions, I think I like a little bit more. But there's great tracks. I think if like we said, it was sequenced differently, it definitely is a sour taste in my mouth how it ends. And to Soraya's point, that's
not funny.
That's a bit. It's how an album leaves you. Definitely has a lasting impact. So
yeah.
How about you guys?
For me, I think it's maybe a number 3. When I stack them against others, I definitely would list. If I had them all, which one would I pick first? I'd pick LA Explosion first. That's just my personal, and then Gin and Innuendos. But Awakening, third.
Wow, wait till you hear Gin and Innuendos, Brant. That's high praise.
We might have to have a Mojack board meeting after this and see if we can bypass the bylaws for...
My ordering is the exact same as Soraya's. Exact.
Okay,
Wow.
well, let's see where we land on this. So we've never, I don't think, in 230 episodes, had any outsiders weigh in on the ballot result. So let's see what happens here.
Let's do it.
Ballot result.
Okay, so round table time. Jeff?
Ballot result cage match.
Yeah. Jeff? Garden Grows, I'm guessing, is yours?
Yeah, that is definitely my favorite, and I think it's the song that just jumped out first. There's definitely a few on here that really stand out to me. I love Assembly Line. Tired, it just has tons of energy, and Awakening is an amazing song.
Yeah.
But Garden Grow, that's the one that just caught me right away, and it's because of the melody. It just has that melody that just sticks with me. So I would have to go with Garden Grow.
Yeah.
All right, Soraya?
There's a few to pick from, hey?
Yeah, well, see, because now Jeff, he said something that it just, I'm all, yeah, Garden Grow. You know what? I'm going to stick with my original. You.
Oh,
Blessed are the simple emotions. Your first pick. There
Yeah.
you go.
There you go.
Ryan, what were your faves?
You know what? I like No Love, You, and Awakening. Those are probably my top three.
We all like different songs.
Yeah, I would actually go. Jeff kind of crapped all over No Love as the intro, but that one it gets its hooks into me right off the hop. I think it's a great opener.
See, my favorites were You, Somebody New, and Your Wings was one of my favorites, and Tired. So
Bizarre.
Wow.
You probably has the most votes.
Right now, yeah.
Yeah.
well, I'm up for anything. Jeff has some pretty strong feelings about Garden Grow, so I'd be cool with putting that on there. I mean, like we've said before, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter as long as everyone checks this record out.
Yeah.
Agreed.
that's the point, right? That's the point. Is to get listeners to give it a shot.
100%.
Absolutely.
I'd be curious what your listeners would have as their ballot result.
We'll see.
All right, well, let's go with Garden Grow.
Dunsky.
Hey, what's next on your guys' podcast? Can you tell us?
Yeah.
And also your other one, Jeff, as well. Your independent project one. What's the haps with that one?
So with Paisley Stage, we've already recorded our next one, right, Soraya? And it's set. It should be released probably by the time this comes out. What we've been focusing on are episodes where just the two of us are recording. We have some interviews scheduled or things that we'd like to do next year. But Soraya, you want to talk about our next episode that we just recorded?
Yeah, so our next episode, we took a look at songs by a side project that Steve Wynn has. Steve Wynn of the Dream Syndicate, and it's the Baseball Project.
Cool.
Oh,
And
yeah.
So Jeff and I living in the U.S., World Series time, and so we said, what better time than now to talk about songs about baseball? So that was our last episode. And then Jeff?
Yeah, so the independent podcast review. We're setting up a few different interviews. Community FK was a goth band out of Los Angeles. We've got agreement from the band to come on and do an interview. It's been really hard to schedule that, so that's what's coming up next. And then we have Bruce coming on for a few different things, and I'm really excited because Robert Loveless, who was original member of 17 Pygmies, who I never got to play with, he's going to be coming on, so I'm very excited about that. So we have a few different things coming up. So inspired by you guys, as you know, we decided to go through the whole independent project records catalog from beginning to end, and we're up to 9 and 10. So it's taken a while to schedule. So those should be coming up shortly. Community FK will be next.
Mm-hmm. And where can people find that, Jeff?
So that is strictly YouTube. So if you go onto YouTube and look up Independent Podcast Review, you could find us there. And I know that the official independent music or independent project music our records music page are also shared as well. So YouTube is the place to go for that. As far as Paisley Stage, we try to put that everywhere. So that is definitely easy. Should be easy to find on Apple Music, iTunes, YouTube, Spotify. That should be everywhere.
Instagram, Facebook, Twitter.
Right on. Hey, thanks so much for being on our podcast today. It was really great having you both.
Yeah, what an honor. Thank you, guys.
Thank
we
you.
are truly honored. We've been very excited about this, Soraya.
This was a ton of fun.
Yeah, and I'm huge fans of You Don't Know Mojack. So having you guys on our show was definitely an honor, and this is equally an honor as well. And talking about a band that we really love a lot, and some of these members, especially Vetus, I have much love for him. So it's good to be talking about this band that we definitely feel passionate about. And thank you guys for doing this and having us be a part of this one.
Absolutely. Hey, Ryan, what's next week?
Next week, Brant, we're going back to Seattle. It's SST 231, the Soundgarden Flower EP.
Wow, that's going to be a great one.
Yeah.
Couldn't agree more.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Tumblr, all at Mojack Pod. We post all kinds of info and tons of pictures of the bands and albums we discuss on the show. Our blog is mojackpod.com. Please check it out for some exclusive content. If you like what we do and want to support the podcast, the best way to do that is to tell your friends about the show. Subscribing, rating, and reviewing on iTunes is also appreciated. We love hearing your opinions, corrections, and feedback, so feel free to post on our social media sites and send us an email to mojackpod@gmail.com. Thanks again for all the support, and we hope to see you next week.